What happens when the most legendary American car becomes its own worst enemy? The Ford Mustang didn't just define a generation, it created one. It turned everyday drivers into rebels, highways into racetracks, and chrome into cultural currency. But over the decades, something changed. Fame became pressure, performance gave way to compromise, and somewhere between horsepower and headlines, the Mustang lost its way. This isn't just a timeline, it's a 5-chapter saga of rebellion, reinvention, and regret. These are the 5 Ford Mustang models that changed everything, for better or for burnout. The Mustang's origin story is the stuff of automotive legend. Born in 1964 as a stylish, affordable coupe, it sparked an entire genre, the pony car. But success breeds expectation, and as the years went on, the Mustang was forced to evolve, sometimes with brilliance, sometimes with betrayal. Each of the 5 Mustangs you're about to meet either ignited a revolution, derailed the brand, or pulled it back from the edge of extinction. Some were heroes, some were cautionary tales, all of them were pivotal. That's right. Top 5, 1965 Mustang Fastback 2+2, the spark that lit the wildfire. The 1964 1/2 Mustang made headlines, but the 1965 Fastback made history. Visually, the 1965 Mustang Fastback 2+2 was an instant standout. Its sloped roofline, recessed rear window, and aerodynamic rear pillars gave it a look that screamed speed, even when standing still. The Fastback profile wasn't just for style, it improved high-speed airflow, making the car more stable on the highway and racetrack alike. Under the hood, buyers could select from a broad range of power plants, but the one that made the difference was the K-Code 289 cubic inch Hypo V8. Rated at 271 horsepower, this small block combustion was built with a solid lifter camshaft, higher compression ratio, dual-point distributor, and a performance carburetor. When paired with the 4-speed top-loader manual transmission, gave the Fastback real teeth. Ford didn't stop there. Options like the GT equipment package added dual exhausts with chrome trumpets exiting through the rear valence, upgraded suspension with front disc brakes, grille mount fog lamps, and quicker steering ratios. The Rally Pack gauge cluster offered a tachometer and clock mounted on the steering column, clear indicators this car was meant for enthusiasts. And then there was the Shelby connection. When Carroll Shelby got involved, the Fastback transformed into the GT300, a race-bred street machine stripped of rear seats, fitted with a fiberglass hood, and tuned to deliver over 300 horsepower. It was loud, raw, and unapologetically fast. But performance came with unintended consequences. The Fastback's overwhelming success created expectations that Ford rushed to meet, by making the car larger, heavier, and increasingly powerful year after year. By 1969, the Mustang had exploded into a range of high-displacement variants: Boss 300, 2S, 428 Cobra Jets, and Mach 1S. Impressive on paper, but a far cry from the balanced formula that made the Fastback special. That original 2+2 was light, agile, and attainable. The later versions? They were turning into boulevard cruisers with muscle car bloat. By 1971, the Mustang had lost its edge. The redesigned body was nearly 8 inches longer and over 600 pounds heavier than the original. Cornering suffered, fuel economy tanked, and though the top engine still delivered straight-lineed speed, the Mustang was losing ground to more focused performance cars like the Camaro Z/28 and lighter imports gaining traction with American drivers. The Fastback 2+2 had proven that a small car with the right engine, suspension, and style could capture the imagination of a generation. But Ford misread the formula. Instead of refining it, they overdid it. And as the 1970S brought an oil crisis, rising insurance premiums, and stricter emissions regulations, Ford faced a critical question. Should the Mustang remain a performance icon? Or should it become something else entirely? In 1974, they made their move. The result wasn't just a new generation. It was a new identity, built on fuel economy, compromise, and a Pinto platform. Top 4. 1974 Mustang II, the identity crisis. How do you follow up a legend when the rules of the game change overnight? Ford's answer was the 1974 Mustang 280, a car born out of necessity, not passion. By the early 1970s, the golden age of muscle was over. Gas prices were spiking, insurance companies were penalizing high horsepower engines, and the federal government was cracking down on emissions and safety. The Mustang, which had grown bigger and more powerful each year, was no longer aligned with the market or the times. So Ford made a bold decision: go small, go clean, go efficient. The 1974 Mustang II was built not on a bespoke performance platform, but on the humble bones of the Ford Pinto. It was 19 inches shorter and nearly 500 pounds lighter than the outgoing model. The wheelbase shrank to just 96.2 inches. Visually, it aimed to recall the original 1965 Mustang's size and simplicity, but under the sheet metal, it was a very different animal. Buyers were offered two engine options: a 2.3L inline-4 that produced 88 horsepower and a 2.8L Cologne V6 with 105 horsepower. Neither was fast. 0 to 60 times hovered above 13 seconds, and quarter-mile runs stretched past 19 seconds. Even the later available 302 V8, introduced in 1975, only managed 140 horsepower due to emissions restrictions and smog equipment. The Mustang II came in several trims, including the base coupe, the Ghia with luxury appointments, and the Mach 1 with sporty visuals. But none were true muscle cars. They were built for ride comfort, fuel economy, and insurance friendliness, not acceleration or tire smoke. Yet somehow, the Mustang II was exactly what the public wanted. It launched to enormous success, selling 385,993 units in its first year, more than any Mustang since the original. Motor Trend even named it Car of the Year for 1974. People praised its maneuverability, compact footprint, and comfortable ride. In a world where gas stations had lines stretching around the block, a 20 MG Mustang felt like a revelation. Mechanically, it offered a few surprises: standard front disc brakes, rack and pinion steering, a first for Mustang, and improved interior quality. The suspension setup, McPherson struts up front, and a live axle with leaf springs in the rear, prioritized comfort over handling, but provided a smooth ride. The cabin was quieter and more refined than any previous Mustang, with Ghia models offering thick carpet, velour seats, and wood grain trim that aimed at the European market. But Mustang purists saw through the transformation. The power was gone. The soul was missing. It may have worn the badge, but it didn't roar like its forebears. To them, it wasn't a pony car. It was a gelding. The Mustang II's engineering was functional, but uninspiring. The lack of performance options alienated longtime enthusiasts, the heavier emissions equipment strangled the already modest power plants, and the Pinto underpinnings didn't exactly scream excitement. Despite its sales success, the Mustang T became a symbol of compromise, a car designed by committees and influenced by crisis. It met the moment, yes, but at the cost of the brand's identity. Even the 302 V8, when it returned, failed to light the fire. It came with a 2-barrel carburetor, made less torque than the old 289 Hypo, and was paired with automatic transmissions that prioritized smoothness over speed. There were no Shelby variants, no Boss badges, no performance legacy to speak of. And yet, the Mustang II didn't kill the Mustang, it saved it. By playing the long game, Ford kept the name alive through one of the toughest decades in automotive history. Without it, there might never have been a GT, a Cobra, or a Fox Buddy. And speaking of Fox Buddy, something was about to shift. By the end of the 1970s, a new generation of drivers wasn't interested in economy. They wanted a Mustang that could move again, and Ford was finally ready to deliver.
Stay with me till the end.
The 5 era was coming. Top 3, 1987 Mustang GT, the Street King returns. The Mustang had survived the 70s, barely. But in 1987, it didn't just return. It took the streets back, hard. The Fox Buddy GT wasn't a nod to nostalgia. It was a middle finger to everything that had made the Mustang boring. By the mid-980s, performance was back in fashion. Car enthusiasts were hungry again, not for velour seats and vinyl tops, but for horsepower, speed, and attitude. The Mustang had already started to claw its way out of the hole with the reintroduction of the 5L V8 in 1982. But 1987, That was the year everything clicked. The Mustang GT received a full redesign that made it meaner, sharper, and louder, both in looks and in sound. The front end featured a new aerodynamic nose with flush halogen headlights and a blacked-out grille, lower ground effects, turbine stipple 15-inch wheels, and a functional hood scoop gave it the stance of a street predator. And the signature 5 badge on the fender, that was a warning, not a decoration. Under the hood, the 1987 Mustang GT packed a 5 L302 cubic inch V8 with sequential multi-port fuel injection, pushing 225 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque, the highest output in a Mustang GT since the Boss 302. Mated to either a slick-shifting 5-speed manual or a 4-speed AOD automatic, it delivered consistent 0-60 AM times in the mid-6-second range and quarter miles in the low 15s. Real-world performance? It meant the Mustang could eat Camaros and IROCs for breakfast and still have time to dust off a few imports before dinner. But it wasn't just about raw acceleration. The GT was more refined underneath. A reworked suspension featured front McPherson struts, rear coil springs with quad shocks to tame axle hop, and beefier sway bars that offered flatter cornering. The result? A muscle car that didn't just sprint, it could actually dance. Inside, the cockpit was all business. High-back articulated sport seats offered real support. A full-gauge cluster with tach, voltmeter, oil pressure, and fuel level gave the driver instant feedback. The chunky, leather-wrapped steering wheel, center console-mounted shifter, and a premium sound system made the GT feel like a proper driver's machine. No frills, just focus. It wasn't perfect. The live rear axle remained a compromise for cost and simplicity. Brakes were front disc and rear drum, and they'd fade if pushed too hard. The interior plastics creaked and rattled with age. But in a decade known for fake wood trim and front-wheel drive mediocrity, the GT's imperfections only made it more authentic. The 1987 GT quickly became a street icon. It wasn't just a car. It was a culture. Street racers, high school kids, and weekend warriors fell in love. It became the car of choice for a new wave of enthusiasts. Stoplight duels, midnight drag runs, parking lot showdowns. The Mustang GT was always there. It exploded in the aftermarket. The 5L Windsor small block became one of the most modified engines in history. Cold air kits, shorty headers, Flowmaster exhausts, nitrous oxide systems, ECU tuners, superchargers, everything was on the table. The GT wasn't just quick, it was a blank canvas for performance. Even the LX5, with its lighter weight and sleeper looks, joined the legend. Some argued it was the smarter buy. But the GT had presence. The flared rocker panels, fog lights, and ground effects made it a statement car. Loud, proud, and unmistakably Mustang. It restored something Ford had lost: credibility. It proved the Blue Oval could still make a performance car that was fast, fun, and affordable. It connected with younger buyers, built brand loyalty, and re-established the Mustang as the people's pony. But nothing lasts forever. The import scene was rising, emissions regulations were tightening, and Ford was preparing for yet another bold change. Could the Mustang survive another reinvention? Or would the SN95 be the end of the Fox body spirit? The next chapter would answer that, in the shape of a completely new frame, a new design, and a new gamble for the future. Top 2, 1994 Mustang GT. The rebrand. The Fox body had roared through the 80s S, loud, unapologetic, and brutally effective. But by the early 90s, it was starting to feel old. The world was changing fast. Imports were stealing headlines, safety standards were tightening, and Ford? They knew the Mustang couldn't outrun time. Enter the SN95 Mustang GT, the car that dared to rewrite the rulebook without erasing the legend. The 1994 Mustang GT was more than a new generation. It was a full-scale rebrand. After 15 years on the aging Fox platform, Ford engineers took what worked, threw out what didn't, and built a Mustang for the modern era. The result? A car that looked familiar, but felt radically different. Let's start with the body. The SN95 dropped the hard-edged geometry of the Fox in favor of sweeping curves and aerodynamic lines. The long hood and short rear deck stayed true to Mustang DNA, but everything else was fresh. Integrated bumpers, sculpted side panels, and tri-bar taillights made it clear this was no boxy holdover. This was Mustang II. Underneath, the changes were just as dramatic. Though technically still riding on a revised Fox platform, now dubbed Fox 4, the SN95 featured over 1,300 new parts. The chassis was 56% stiffer. Ride quality was improved with a retuned suspension, while NVH, noise, vibration, harshness. And then there was the heart. Under the hood, the 1994 Mustang GT carried over the familiar 5L Windsor V8, but don't be fooled. Despite still making 215 horsepower and 285 pound-feet of torque, the engine had been retuned with a new intake, revised heads, and computer-controlled fuel delivery. Mated to a 5-speed T5 manual or a 4-speed automatic, it delivered a 0-60 time of about 6.5 seconds. Impressive, yes, but it also marked the end of an era. The beloved Pushrod 5, which had powered Mustangs for over a decade, was nearing retirement. Ford was already prepping the new 4.6L modular V8 for the Cobra and upcoming GT models. The SN95 GT would be the last to carry the Windsor torch. Still, it wasn't just about speed. The 1994 GT was safer too. Dual airbags became standard, along with a stronger crash structure. The interior was redesigned for both comfort and function: sweeping dash, white-faced gauges, ergonomic seats, and improved materials. It was the first Mustang to feel like a complete car, not just an engine with a body wrapped around it. And yet, not everyone was impressed. To hardcore Fox Buddy loyalists, the SN95 felt soft, too refined, too civilized. Where was the raw edge, the guttural exhaust, the sense of barely contained aggression? For some, the 1994 GT was a step forward, but also a step away from what made the Mustang a street king. But Ford wasn't chasing the past. They were aiming at the future. The SN95 appealed to a broader audience. It attracted buyers who wanted style and substance, speed and safety. It opened the door for Mustang convertibles, Cobra SVT editions, and eventually the high-revving DOHC 4.6L V8S that would define the late 90s. It proved the Mustang could evolve and survive. Sales spoke volumes. The 1994 Mustang was an instant hit. With over 123,000 GTs sold in its first year, it was named Motor Trend's Car of the Year. The Mustang wasn't just back. It was relevant again. The aftermarket followed. Body kits, exhaust systems, ECU chips. The SN95 may have been smoother than its predecessor, but it was still ripe for customization. And while it didn't have the raw street presence of the 87 GT, it offered something else: balance, maturity, staying power. But the clock never stops ticking. As the new millennium approached, competitors were sharpening their claws. GM's LS-powered F-bodies were faster, imports were getting bolder. And Ford? They were ready to unleash something different again. The next Mustang wouldn't just be an evolution, it would be a revolution. Top 1 2005 Mustang GT, the revival. By the early 2000s, the Mustang was fading. The SN95 had softened the edges, imports were dominating the streets, and GM's LS-powered Camaros were breathing fire. Enthusiasts began whispering the unthinkable. Had the Mustang lost its soul? Then came 2005, and with it a shape that hit like a thunderclap. Retro curves, muscular stance. A grille that sneered. This wasn't just a redesign, it was a resurrection. The 2005 Mustang GT, codenamed S197, was the revival. Ford knew they had to do more than evolve, they had to reconnect. So they tore up the old playbook and started fresh. The 2005 Mustang rode on an all-new platform, ditching the aging Fox 4 bones. The S197 chassis was stiffer, longer, wider, and ready to rumble. Design-wise, the GT was a visual love letter to the past. Inspired by the 67-69 Fastbacks, it brought back the long hood, short deck, and fastback slope that defined Mustang DNA. The tri-bar taillights, the shark nose grille, and those deeply inset headlights, all deliberate callbacks. But under the nostalgia, a beast was waiting. Under the hood sat a 4.6L modular V8, now fitted with 3-valve heads and variable cam timing. Output 300 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque. Finally, the Mustang had the brawn to match its barks. Paired with a Tremec 5-speed manual, the GT could rocket from 0 to 60 in just 5.1 seconds. The suspension was still a live rear axle, a point of contention, but it had been completely re-engineered. New dampers, geometry, and a more rigid structure made the S197 handle better than any previous Mustang. It wasn't a corner carver like a BMW, but it was sharper, more predictable, and downright fun. But here's the twist. What really brought the Mustang GT back to glory wasn't just the numbers, it was the emotion. This car made people feel something. It was the return of swagger, of parking lot standoffs and late-night cruises. It rekindled a fire. Baby boomers who'd once owned 65S lined up to relive their youth. Younger drivers finally had a car that looked like the legends they'd seen in Bullet or Gone in 60 Seconds. And the aftermarket? It exploded. Superchargers, body kits, exhausts. The S197 became the new canvas for car culture. The cabin, though still plastic heavy, had a style all its own. Twin-pod retro gauges, aluminum accents, and deep bucket seats set the tone. Optional shaker audio systems boomed, and for the first time in years, a Mustang interior didn't feel like an afterthought. Ford nailed the price point too. A base GT started under $25,000, a bargain for 300 horsepower and style that turned heads everywhere. Sales skyrocketed. In its first year alone, over 160,000 Mustangs found homes. The Mustang wasn't just back, it was leading the charge. But no revival is without flaws. Critics pointed at the solid rear axle, archaic in a world of independent suspensions. Others noted the interior plastics felt cheap. And while the GT was fast, it still fell short of some rivals in the corners. Still, none of it mattered, because the 2005 Mustang GT did something no Mustang had done in decades. It united the past and future. It reminded the world what a Mustang could be. Bold, brash, iconic. It wasn't chasing Europe. It wasn't trying to be a sports car. It was embracing its muscle roots, with just enough modern DNA to make it relevant. The 2005 Mustang GT didn't just bring the Mustang back, it redefined what it meant to be one in the 21st century. But as the decade came to a close, the game was changing fast. Rivals were evolving, and the muscle car wars had reignited. The question wasn't whether the Mustang could survive, it was whether it could lead the charge once more. These 5 Mustangs didn't just change the car, they changed the culture. From street heroes to sales flops, from revolutions to regrets, the Mustang story is messy, glorious, and still unfolding. Which of these chapters shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments. If you loved this ride through Mustang history, give us a like, share it with your favorite gearhead, and subscribe to Top 5 Muscle Cars for more stories that roar, stumble, and rise again. Because legends never idle. They just wait for the green light.